SIGA, the world's largest coalition in the field of sports governance and integrity, brings you the second webinar of the series, COVID 360, Where Does Football Go Now?, in partnership with Soccerex. The protagonists of this exclusive, high-level and insightful discussion include two of the most senior and experienced leaders in world football and sports integrity. Victor Montagliani, President of Concacaf and Vice President of FIFA, and Amanda de Medeiros, CEO of SIGA, Chairman and CEO of SIGA America, and founder and former CEO of the European Football Leagues and World League Association. Moderating this webinar, we have Amanda Davies, sports anchor at CNN.
Where does football go now? As you heard, I'm Amanda Davies, sports anchor at CNN, based here in London, a very sunny London on this Wednesday afternoon. And once again, it's fantastic to see so many of you who've signed up and joined us. I think about 400 people we've got so far tuning in and watching, due to be with us for the next hour or so for what promises to be another fascinating discussion. If you joined our first event 3 weeks ago, you'll have seen me with shorter hair. Perhaps the roots weren't so long either, but you'll have heard the focus on the impact of the pandemic on the leagues, the clubs and the players. Today, we're looking much more broadly than that, to the confederation and the global level of football. There's been a whole lot of focus, hasn't there, on Europe, particularly in the last week or so, with action returning in the Bundesliga. Lots of talk about Project Restart, the Premier League project continuing. But what's the reality in terms of the bigger picture? And I'm delighted to say that I have two esteemed guests to discuss just that over the next hour or so. Victor Montagliani, President of Concacaf and FIFA Vice President, and Amanda de Medeiros, CEO of the Sport Integrity Global Alliance and founder and former CEO of the European Professional Football Leagues and the World League Association. As before, there will be the opportunity for anybody watching to ask questions. Please do write them in the comment box, and I'll ask as many as I can before the end of the session. But let's not waste any more time and get the conversation cracking. Great to see you both, gentlemen. The good news, football is back. The first major league in Europe got back to action the weekend. Victor, what did you make of it?
Well, I think it was exciting to just see a ball roll on the pitch and see players play. Obviously, it's a little strange not to have fans, especially in the league that is well known for its fan base and outstanding atmosphere. But you know, they dealt with the situation like they needed to. They got back on the pitch. They did everything. So I think kudos go out to, first of all, the Bundesliga and Christian Seifert and his team, and also obviously the clubs and doing what they needed to do. So it's a positive sign. It's a great sign. We have a league as well here in CONCACAF that got rolling out in Costa Rica. And as you said earlier, the English league is looking to come back. And these are great signs that football is slowly but surely coming back to the fold.
I know Christian Seifert very much was talking about it as a test. He was aware there's a lot of eyes on the Bundesliga at the moment as we're feeling our way back into football. Would you classify last weekend as a success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to call it a success. I mean, they were dealt with a situation that wasn't easy. They dealt with all their local authorities. I mean, it wasn't just a matter of them coming together as a Bundesliga and clubs saying we're going to go out and play next weekend. They had to follow all the right protocols. They had to have all the regional governments sign off. They had to have the federal government sign off. they did what they needed to do, and they pulled off all the matches that they pulled off. I mean, it can't be nothing other than a success, especially thinking about the circumstances involved in trying to get those matches on this weekend or this past weekend.
Emmanuel, what was your take on it?
Oh, I missed football like everybody else, especially given my background in the industry. Imagine a weekend without football. It's like spring without the birds and the sound of nature. But I think it was a success. And again, I would like to join my words of congratulations to Christian and his team. We were all making positive chain movement in order to hope that everything went well, and everything was very successful. Huge effort in terms of preparation. As Victor has already mentioned, the prevention was key. The outcome, I think, was very, very important. It also had a positive spark, a positive influence on other leagues who are now restoring their competitions. From every angle, I would say this was a success. And I think we are very happy to have football back in action, because life without football is like food without salt. It is not the same thing.
Victor, though, do you think it increases the pressure on other leagues around the world to get back to action, even when there might not necessarily be the right conditions? We might not be in the right place in the fight against coronavirus in those places.
I would think for some leagues it might increase, maybe especially at the peer level, where the Bundesliga is. But I think we need to be prudent in that and realize that that leagues like a Bundesliga, their standards even before COVID obviously are at a very high level. God did not create all leagues, clubs, and players equally. That's why we have Ronaldo and Messi, and you got other players. So I think we need to be prudent in our approach, and that every league should try, obviously, in their own way to get back onto the pitch, whether it be as the Bundesliga did, or as some others that are planning to do sort of a tournament style in one or two venues. There is a solution for everyone. Some will not play and then start playing in September. So there is a solution for everybody, but it has to be tailor-made to your specific area. You have to follow your authorities, both health and government, just like the Bundesliga. So the framework of what the Bundesliga did, I think, is important, in that they follow the right protocols. But in terms of how they did it, they obviously did it different than when somebody else is going to do it. But I think everybody has a roadmap to victory, and it's just a matter of following your own roadmap and not being pressurized by what a Bundesliga or an English Premier League or an MLS is going to do perhaps down the road here. So, but I think it gives inspiration to everybody to try to get back onto the pitch.
So what can the CONCACAF federations learn from what they've seen playing out in Europe over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think all the confederations, we speak on a weekly basis because we're all in it together, we're all sort of fighting this issue, whether it be in Europe, whether it be in CONCACAF or Asia or South America. And so, all our leagues are in the same predicament. Some are at various levels, but I also think, we are, I think this is the uniqueness about football, maybe more than any other sport that I know. And here in North America, we have some pretty big sports, as we all know, and they can make their decisions in isolation. They can get in a room with 30 owners and decide what to do as long as they speak to one government. I think football is unique in that we are all interconnected. That's what it shows. So when the Bundesliga puts something on, it's not just about German football or European football. It's just inspirational to all of us. And that's why, and everything's intertwined with the calendar, whether it be international football, confederation football, whether it be domestic football. There's always that interconnection, which I think makes things very complicated, unfortunately, to try to get going. But it also, it shows maybe, I think, the essence of our sport and why it's such a global force.
I think we'll come on to the specifics a little bit later on. But Emmanuel, when we were talking 3 weeks ago, we were trying to quantify, weren't we, the impact of this crisis on football. Sitting here now, 3 weeks on, are we any further down that road, do you think?
I think what we see is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that, 3 weeks ago, the only certainty was uncertainty. Everything was still pretty much in the realm of speculation. And there was then a certain anguish, despair, frustration, because we were dealing with the immediate effect of this global pandemic and what was already perceived as an incoming economic crisis, with brutal effect on all sectors, with record-breaking figures in terms of unemployment and companies' bankruptcy levels. So within 3 weeks, putting in action all initiatives, all measures to step by step restore the new normal within the sports industry and in particular in football, I think we have reasons to be confident about the next phase. And the next phase is still a little bit dominated by question marks and by prudence and by several concerns. But if there is a lesson that we can already take as granted, looking to the record-breaking viewership numbers that we have seen over the weekend from the DFL, seeing also the positive impact that this will have in terms of restoring the confidence, including within the business community. It is not the secret that the big sponsors, the big US sponsors, are now focusing only exclusively on US sport, have announced major cuts in sports advertisement, sports sponsorship, something totaling $17.2 billion US. That is 38% of the global investment. So it's a huge financial hit for all sports, for all organizations, for all stakeholders. And I think that this experience has shown, like others will confirm, that if stakeholders and key decision makers act in a concerted, coordinated fashion and privilege the common interests in detriment to small divergences here and there, I think that is a way to win this fight against COVID-19 and what it means in terms of financial impact within the sports industry. Another positive example, the solidarity within the industry. And I think here kudos goes to FIFA, to UEFA, to CONCACAF for the immediate response. In moments of crisis, you cannot be waiting. You have to act. And this was precisely what they have done by announcing financial aid to those member associations that need it, by also expressing a solidarity which is absolutely unprecedented from the football community. And obviously, this is very important to highlight. But again, there is a huge financial damage caused in sport, in football in particular, because it's the predominant industry within sport with financial expression. But I think that with leadership, with concerted action, with dialogue, and I think I would like also to say to praise Victor's role within the FIFA committee that brings together all key stakeholders. I think there are positive examples and positive encouragements that will facilitate the next steps and the restore of confidence in the football industry.
Victor, would your leagues, your national associations agree that the confederation, that FIFA, the football leadership has done a good job, do you think?
Yeah, I think overall, I think they would agree. I mean, the key to that is communication. And I think Emmanuel already hit on it. I think in a crisis, speed is sometimes better than perfection. You're not always going to get everything right, but I think the important thing is is the communication was very quick. We're in constant communication with our members, and I think that's very important. People want to be in this crisis. People want to know that they're being heard. Sometimes actions take a bit of time because you have to wait on doing some things until it's the right time. But I think the lines of communication have been very good, which has led to people having a good spirit about things. And obviously, some people have suffered losses, others have suffered less. I think there'll be probably an inventory here at some point over the next months in terms of what the football world has been hit by. But I think all our members are quite pleased with respect to how things have been handled and overall. And I think the solidarity that the football world has showed is quite refreshing.
You have such a diverse confederation, don't you, in terms of the discrepancies between rich and poor. What are the biggest challenges that your member associations are facing? What have they been concerned about? What are they talking to you about?
I think their biggest concern, is the uncertainty. It's something, football has grown up over the last 100 or so years. Other than the Second World War, nobody has told football really what to do, and said you can't do this, you can't do that. We kind of do what we want. We're kind of like the spoiled child in the universe. It seems at times we kind of do whatever we want with our sport. But I think for once, football has now been told you can't play. You have to follow the rules of health authorities and government authorities. I think that's a new world for us in football, and I think so. The uncertainty has been the biggest thing. When are we going to get back? How are we going to get back? What it will be like when we get back? For instance, one of the things too that I think a lot of people are concerned about is not so much the damages currently. I mean, the damages you're seeing more at the league level and at the club level. At the federation level, they're less. I'm not saying there's not there, but they're a lot less because the national teams are not being brought in. There's no camp, so they're not spending money in that regards. But I think what is the unknown for a lot of federations is the future costs. For instance, the extra expenses that will be entailed to run international football. For instance, what will be the travel protocols that are going to be put in place by the industry that will increase costs for a national team to travel? What are some of the medical protocols and health protocols being put in, not only by, for instance, it might be by competitions. Years ago, for instance, you didn't have to have an EKG. Now, for most of the tournaments, you have to send in your medical on every player and make sure they all had an EKG because of what happened to a few players. Obviously, immunization will be a key issue as we move forward. So these are all costs that are going to increase for federations as we move forward, but we don't know what they're going to be. So I think it's more the unknown part and what costs will be associated with the unknown that I think is what is keeping sort of some of the federation presidents maybe a bit restless when they go to sleep at night.
Do you honestly think decisions that are being made at the moment about football are being made for health reasons and safety reasons, or are they being made because of these financial concerns?
I think they are being made for health reasons. I'm not saying that the financial concerns are not an integral part of that decision making, but that's no different than any government as well. I think governments also it's a balance between the health of your citizens and also ensuring that the economy doesn't collapse as well, because so there is a bit of a balancing act that has to be done, no different than any government, where the health of the citizens are primary and have to be. That's why you've seen a lockdown, and football has done that. We've locked down like everybody else, and now we're slowly looking into it. And obviously, financial reasons have to take it into account. I mean, we just opened up our economy here in Vancouver this week, slowly with small businesses, because we understand that those are important and vital to the community. Football is important and vital to the community as well. So it's slowly but surely. It's got to follow the rules, as I said earlier. But obviously, it's a balance between the health and the finances. It's a reality. But I think overall, from what I've seen in the Bundesliga, show that they took the health priorities as primary, and make sure that they follow the protocols that were set out by the authorities.
Emmanuel, do you agree with that from what you've seen, that enough thought, care is being given to the players and the health of everybody involved in football? We've, here in England, we've had a significant number of players speaking out their concerns about heading back to training.
I mean, I totally understand the concern. It's perfectly legitimate. I have a son who is a football player, and I wouldn't say these decisions can be taken lightly. They involve responsibilities, and there's nothing compared to health in terms of priorities. So I believe that all sports organizations and every key stakeholders and everyone involved in the game has prioritized health. And that is, I think, something indisputable. Obviously, this is not just exclusively a health crisis of biblical proportions, I would add. It's also an economic crisis with an unprecedented gravity since we haven't seen since the Second World War. I mean, all the figures are there. All sectors have been hit. And besides the health crisis and the economic crisis, there is also a crisis in confidence. And we already see this in those countries who have started to their lockdown exit strategies. We already see this fear, this lack of confidence, which is aggravated, obviously, by a certain ambiguity in terms of messaging coming from the global leaders. All this context of dispute, litigation, quarrel, conflict between world leaders in a moment where there should be one vision, one mission, one voice rowing to the same side to restore trust and confidence in our societies and our economy, we see these signs of lack of leadership, and this has been also an undermining fact to the confidence and to restore the new normal. But again, if you see the way the football economy is so flexible and agile, see, for example, that on one hand, we have seen a decrease on sponsorship investment on the traditional linear television. But on the other hand, it has been growing exponentially on the OTTs, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. So the ability of the industry to renew itself is amazing. And I've seen this back in 2007, 13 years ago, when we had this also very deep, very profound, very grave economic global recession. And the only way that football managed to soften the financial hit was because, like Victor was suggesting, there were long-term contracts in place with broadcasters and with sponsors. Had this not happened, football would have been on its knees. And the fact that it's not catastrophic, the situation, is because there were already long-term agreements in place, and CONCACAF also is in a very healthy position because it did its homework in due time. And of course, to that end, the restore of the credibility and the image of CONCACAF were paramount. And for that, I take my hat off to Victor, because like I was saying some days ago, the legacy that he inherited was quite heavy. So this contributed also to alleviate the current symptoms and the current impact. But
I wouldn't there be a number of clubs who would say that the impact of this is fairly catastrophic? I mean, Victor, what would be your take on that? I don't think it's as easy to say it's black or white, is it?
No. Well, no, listen, for us to sit here and think that everything will go back to exactly the way it was for every club prior to March, whatever it was, the 11th or 12th when things shut down, is unrealistic. There will be casualties, like there is in every situation, whether it be the financial crisis of 2008, whether it's going to be this. There will be casualties, unfortunately, whether it be at the club level.
Can you begin to quantify that? Have you got any indication yet of what we're, how many clubs are we looking at the top level?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the biggest risk might not even be at the top level. It might be more at the community level, and whether they're pro or semi-pro or whatever, because the small club that relies on the local sponsorships of the local fish and chip shop and all that, that might be hard to come by. A lot of the smaller clubs rely on the economics of bums and seats rather than TV money. And so again, that might be hard to come by. So I think it's going to be more at the smaller level, at the community level. I think at the bigger level, you may have some, but I think in some ways they might be too big to fail, and they'll find the resources. And I think, as Emmanuel said, they'll probably be creative in how they can survive. But listen, I think to sit here and think that there'd be no casualties in world football would be a fallacy, because I think there will be. I'm hoping obviously that there isn't, but I think it's a reality of the situation. But again, I think football will somehow, whether it's a league or at a club level, reinvent itself at some point. And we've seen for other reasons clubs die, and then all of a sudden the club comes back in another form years later. So I think there will be some of that happening too as we move on. This is going to be organic. It's not going to be a turn off the switch where, okay, now we're out of this. It's going to be a gradual growth back into it, and it's going to take, it'll probably take some time before we feel normal again in terms of what we were used to in football. And by the way, that some of that normal, I think, may not have to change as well, because this is also an opportunity for the industry to look at ways to get better in certain areas, whether it be governance or financial management or other areas. I think you can't, and maybe CONCACAF, and that we've learned this lesson. You can't let a crisis go to waste. So this is an opportunity, I think, for the industry to look at areas that it can improve in.
Before we move to broad scale, are there any of the safety precautions, the protocols that we've seen brought in the Bundesliga that are coming in the immediate future? Can you foresee any of those, Victor, coming in long term, being adopted long term?
Yeah, I would think some of the medical protocols. I'm not a medical expert. You'd have to talk to my medical chair, but I could see some of that being brought in. I think I gave an example before of some of the medical protocols that were not in place even up until 10 years ago, that are not in place for a country or a club to enter into a competition. So when you get a list of this is what has to happen before you are accepted to enter the competition, even the World Cup, for instance, the medical protocols that a World Cup have changed. And so I think this will actually, there will be changes. I am pretty positive on how we do things. It could be things like, for instance, every player has to have an immunization card, for instance, that ensures that that might happen to all of us that are traveling. You might not be able to get into a country without an immunization card. And some countries already have it, but they don't even, they might not follow the rule as much. They probably were lax in the governance of that, but I think that's going to come back, for instance, in some countries or many more. So I think you will see.
You get into difficult legal ground there. You have the likes of Novak Djokovic, who has spoken out and said he wouldn't be happy having a vaccination.
Yeah, I mean, you get into these issues of privacy, civil liberties issues. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. And again, there has to be a balance between that. But at the end of the day, whether it's Novak or me, if I want to enter into a country and they tell me I can't come in because I don't have an immunization card, there's not much I can probably do about it, other than turning around and going back to going home. So the reality is that may happen, but I've heard many civil liberties attorneys and spokespeople say that that is a slippery slope when it comes to this. In fact, some of the things that governments have a lot of power now to enacting a lot of things, spending money. Those are a bit slippery slopes, but that's more of a political discussion than a football discussion.
What are the main safety protocols, the medical protocols that you as CONCACAF are advocating that you want to see taken up in the short term?
Well, obviously, I think if a medical solution is found for this issue, whether it be an immunization or some sort of other medical solution, I would think that would have to be paramount. For instance, I'll give you an example. Any of our tournaments that are happening, I would think it would be part of the protocol to ensure that the team, whether it be players or officials, need to have that in place before traveling into a CONCACAF tournament. I could see something like that being discussed at our medical committee and likely probably being enacted. But those are things I think need to be really addressed. Balancing again the reality of having those solutions and also ensuring that you're not stepping on any privacy issues. But from a medical perspective, I think those things are going to be seriously looked at, and I'd be very surprised if they're not implemented.
I have to ask you specifically, Victor, when do you think we're going to see football back in the MLS? When is the MLS going to come back, in your opinion?
Well, you know what? I'm hoping that they've been talking about doing some form of a league here coming in the summer, and you can see some of the. I've seen some of the governors in certain states. I think Florida and California, the two of the bigger states, say that professional sports is welcome to come. Obviously, the protocols will be put in place with no fans and etc. So I'm pretty optimistic that the MLS will likely be back this summer in some form, and hopefully that can continue onto the rest of the fall schedule at some point. So I'm pretty optimistic about that.
Is the need for football, for soccer, to come back in the United States there to the degree that it is in Europe, with the focus in the States on the NBA, on the likes of the NFL?
Yeah, you can call it football. I prefer that, so don't worry about it. So
glad we cleared that up.
yeah. So yes, I think. Listen, I think obviously, unlike the history of Europe, unlike where football sits in the European landscape, and also the relevancy of the game in Europe. And likely everywhere else, I think in this part of the world, in North America, the competition is a lot fiercer for the eyeballs of the consumer. You have, let's face it, you name any other sport in the world, the best league in the world is here. Basketball, baseball, hockey, maybe even ping pong, for all I know. But
claim. You should see Emmanuel's face on that.
I'm more neutral these days, so not comment which one is the best. But I think that the simple fact that we are able to discuss this is already a plus in a context like the one we are facing. But if you allow me, I would like to come back to you regarding the health. What's going to change in the new landscape that we have around the corner? Definitely, health will be a top priority. And similar to health, I think there is another evidence which has emerged strong, and that is a clear notion of the financial vulnerabilities of sport as a whole and football in particular. When we were discussing just a while ago the financial impact of this global pandemic in football, obviously the situation at club level is dramatically different. Clubs have been hit more than federations or more than confederations or more than international federations themselves. Although I would like to add that from an international federation perspective, also the lack of financial sustainability or the deficit of it has also emerged as a quite strong evidence. You know, many international federations would probably not survive at the end of the year without the transfer of funds from the International Olympic Committee, and that is the reality. So I think that we all need, at the different levels, all need to make an effort to ensure that football is, and sport is, sustainable, that clubs and other organizations live within their means. And this call for action is more urgent than ever because, as you can see, all the financial supervision authorities are either postponing or introducing greater flexibility in terms of financial supervision. And this is valid for countries as well as to football stakeholders, including the clubs. UEFA has suspended some of the stringent criteria of the club licensing system. And I believe that CONCACAF has done the same because for unprecedented situations and problems, unprecedented solutions are required. But again, let this not be an excuse for us to start thinking that financial crime or financial impropriety or lack of transparency will be allowed. On the contrary, these are not the antidotes. These are the immediate response from the industry to what is an unprecedented crisis. And again, in the perspective of the small clubs, which I know intimately, knowing that the bulk of their income sources are related with TV rights and players transfers, no doubt that these income sources will be greatly affected. I don't see the 2020 investment in players transfer totaling 7.8 billion in terms of international transfers, or 15 billion including domestic players transfers. Those numbers would be unrealistic. So obviously, in terms of financial sustainability of the smaller clubs, the challenges are huge. And also, as you know, their vulnerability puts them in a very delicate situation to say no to things like creative accountancy, to illicit financial flows, and to the unscrupulous influence of criminal individuals and even organized crime. So for the sports authorities, for football authorities, these challenges are way beyond the exclusive narrow limit of the health impact, which is huge. And nobody was prepared to deal with this. So I think also this is an opportunity to have a clear discussion about where we are, what needs to be done, because there are measures and there are reforms that cannot be postponed any longer if we want to have an industry capable of being resilient to a second wave of coronavirus or whatever virus that may come next. So that's my appeal, and that is why SIGA is absolutely ready, open, available, keen to participate and collaborate with all like-minded organizations, governments included, and obviously CONCACAF, who I already said has done a terrific job in restoring the integrity and the credibility and transparency of CONCACAF for the benefit of the clubs, for the benefit of the fans, and the growing industry which we can see rising across Central and North America.
Emmanuel, the challenge with that kind of goes back to what we were talking about last time, the balance in terms of resources that we've got at the moment of dealing with the immediate short-term crisis, which no doubt needs to be sorted, but then maybe also perhaps using the opportunity to take a step back and put in some longer-term, more fundamental changes. Victor, what do you see? I know you're here with two hats. Let's start with the CONCACAF hat. What do you see as CONCACAF's role in dealing with a crisis like this? So from a confederation's role.
Yeah, I think our role as a confederation is obviously to first and foremost, we've already started immediately with helping out where we could. We have our own fund here. We, as Emmanuel said, we relaxed some of the rules and regulations so that that fund could be used for things, for instance, that couldn't before, for instance, could not be used for salaries at our federation. But we said, obviously this is a human crisis. and it's important. And without any programs going on, I think it's very important to retain your human talent so that they're not furrowed. So we allow that to happen so that to help out the federations. And really for us, after that is ensuring that the confederation stays on solid ground, which it is. And after the work we've done over the last 4 years, and really after that is this crisis is, as much as it's on the business side and whatever, I think we approach everything here at CONCACAF more from a human aspect, kind of like a family environment. And I think the most important thing is, as we move forward out of the crisis, is to look at the human aspect of our confederation, to ensure that's intact. The fabric of our confederation is really the people of our confederation, starting at the federation and obviously going down to the leagues and the clubs. So that is, to me, very, very important, that fabric remains intact. And then that makes it a lot easier when you have that intact and that unity to ensure that you can make those decisions that have to be made on the hardware of the game, in terms of leagues and clubs and obviously confederation type of events that we have to make decisions on, whether it be Gold Cup or Champions League or stuff like that.
Do the confederations have enough power, in your opinion?
Well, we have it within our own confederation. Obviously, as a confederation president, I sit at the table of FIFA with my other 6 colleagues. FIFA is run as a federation, and that you have 6 federations that involve with FIFA. It's a unique governance structure because my members are not only members of CONCACAF, but they're also members of FIFA. So they're members of 2 organizations, and so listen, do we have enough power? I mean, power, to me, power leadership is not about power; it's about service. And I think too often football has looked at things of leveraging power, whether it's economic or otherwise. And I think we need to move beyond that. Quite frankly, I think if anything, this crisis shows is that even the most powerful get knocked down to their knees, whether it be a league or a club or whatever. And I think what I hope happens in football is that humbleness comes back into the game, and that we need to realize that we're here to service the game and service the fans. And if an empty stadium is not enough evidence for anybody watching that it's all about the fans and all about the players, I don't know what else is. So I think that's one of the lessons we need to learn, is that this word power needs to kind of, in the way it's traditionally been done, needs to kind of leave the lexicon of football, and the word service needs to come back into the lexicon of football.
How much do you think the fans, though, have really been taken into consideration with decisions that have been made in the last couple of weeks and months?
I don't know. I mean, I can only speak from my perspective. I mean, obviously I'm not in the room when a league makes a decision or a club makes a decision. Obviously governments have told us there's no fans for anything, not just football matches, but for anything. And my daughters are quite upset that their concerts have all been canceled this summer. So those are fans that are not going to be experiencing that. I think there's maybe been some isolated cases where fans have been upset about maybe cancellation of leagues and tournaments and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know any of that come off the top of my head. And don't forget, fans will look at things in one way as well, right? That's why they're fans. It's funny, I had this discussion with my dad, who's a big Inter Milan fan, the other day when I went to social distance to visit my 85-year-old dad, who's a big Inter Milan fan. And I kind of joked to him, he said, they should just cancel the league and no champion. And I said, I'm sure if Inter Milan was at the top of the table, Dad, you wouldn't be saying that. And then he just ran off and went to make me a coffee because I think I upset him. But so, there's a great fan right there, right? It's in my own family. So, but I think overall, I mean, obviously with the fans not being allowed in the stadium, those are decisions that I think have been pertinent to ensuring the safety of our fans. But in terms of as we move forward, I think it's quite important. I think your point is that as we move forward and how we make the decisions to restart football and some of the even governance and ethical decisions we have to make as it relates to our tournaments and who comes in and who doesn't come in and what's canceled and how it's canceled. Those are important decisions, I think, that you have to take into account, the fan, because, Emmanuel earlier said that, referenced me as the chairman of the stakeholder and committee, which has clubs, leagues, federations, confederations. But I think one of the significant stakeholders that is not at the table of football is the fan. And so we need to be cognizant. When we are at the table, doesn't matter what hat you have on, whether it's myself, whether it's Emmanuel, whether it's Christian Seifert, who we referenced earlier, that one of the people that we do represent is the fan. So I think it is an important element when we make decisions to keep that in mind.
And Emmanuel, I know what you are hoping for in terms of more transparency and the financial changes in football. You've talked about a different leadership structure for that to happen. What would you like to see? How do we get to where you want to get to?
Well, I think the first ingredient, and thank you, it's not just my wish, it's not just my aspiration. I think it's an aspiration that is shared by the world. Those who really love sport, those who really want to have a clean business industry, all those who are in favor of the rule of law and sport for what it truly stands for are backing this call. What I would like to see is that we move beyond intentions and proclamations into actions and results. What I want to see is not grandiloquent meetings and with the finest and most senior representatives from international organizations to discuss, the sex of angels, but I want real reforms. Because unless we are able to offer to the fans sporting truth on the pitch and off the pitch, unless we're able to guarantee to those who invest their millions and their billions, and also they invest their reputation, unless we are able to offer top-level entertainment, but with a level playing field and integrity and transparency, we are not doing a favor to anyone. We are killing the game and its global appeal. So if we want to generate more popularity, if we want to galvanize more investment, if we want to create wealth to be reinvested into other sectors, we must do the basic. And the basic is clean sport. And this is what I have seen, small steps, drop by drop. Sometimes it's frustrating, but probably in a world like ours, it's the only way to advance. It's step by step, with a constructive tone, with a positive message, and with solutions. What I would like to see is governance in a way that ensures democracy, accountability, transparency within sports organizations. And those who are at the top must lead the way to the others below the pyramid. What I would like to see would be effective financial integrity and transparency. I mentioned a while ago that last year, $7.35 billion was how much clubs have invested in players' transfers, international transfers. Now, we also know that until you have a clearinghouse system, which is an idea that I've been championing for years, more years than I can remember, and Johnny also had the merit to seize it, and now is moving forward with this under the leadership of Victor and the concerned committee. Until we put an end to all this opacity that is coming from tax havens, offshore vehicles, offshore transactions, and criminal infiltration, we will not be able to offer to the fans and to the financial industry and to ourselves the sport that we deserve. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need a silver bullet. We just need to put in place some basic, fundamental measures. And I believe, from what I've seen, and I'm now addressing myself directly to Victor, from what I've seen, Victor, from your journey since you were elected and before that, I think we need champions. We need leaders. And we call upon you and others to have the courage and do what has to be done so that clubs can live within their means, and football can be, as we see on the pitch, played under the lights in front of everyone, and not in back rooms and opaque vehicles. No need to invent the wheel, no need for a silver bullet. Let's just do the basic. And now we have the perfect conditions to do that step forward.
Yeah, listen, I cannot disagree with you, Manuel. In fact, we have taken steps, you're right, at the Stakeholders Committee. You know, it started off with small steps. I think it's gaining momentum. Obviously, this crisis has slowed down any of those meetings, but, you know, we put on governance around agents in terms of ensuring that they're governed and licensed and continuing education. Their commissions are capped. We've put in the clearinghouse, as you already alluded to, ensuring that there's transparency in the transfer system. You know, I think we need to start looking at other things. For instance, you know, maybe it's just my North American experience, but everybody has a salary cap here that's very transparent. And it gives the contractual stability to the players. It also gives stability to ownership. These are things I think that the football world needs to start looking at in a serious way. And, you know, I think, you know, real integrity, as they say, is doing the right thing, even when people are not looking. And I think it's not about getting on an altar and preaching about whatever. It's about actually doing the right thing on a daily and consistent basis. And I think football needs to push the envelope on that. I think on the governance side, and I think the Stakeholders Committee, you know, to the credit of the guys around the table, listen, I can tell you, some of these conversations are uncomfortable, and it's not uncomfortable because of an integrity issue, because everybody I think around the table comes with a good mind. I think a lot of this stuff is uncomfortable because it's a different way of doing things. You know, football has been used to doing certain things for a long time. And so I think some of these things are a bit uncomfortable because they've been doing things one way. For instance, we talked about training compensation, how that works. We wanted, you know, and in terms of how it used to work between club to club. Well, then we introduced the clearinghouse. We wanted to put some of that tacked onto it to the clearinghouse and the transfer system. And, you know, I can be honest with you, there was a bit of uneasiness because it would remove the club to club discussion. Well, you know, and I'm not sure that is an issue of a financial issue. That's more of a control issue. And so I think a lot of it in our world is about losing, or the perception, to be honest with you, the perception of losing control of whatever position you may be at. And I think sometimes we need to get in a room and forget about that and see what's best. And, you know, perhaps an opportunity now is to hit the reset button on some of these issues to ensure, you know, that perhaps some of these things can be done in a more transparent way in terms of how we do business in football. I think we've started that journey. But I think it needs to continue and not obviously stop, because at the end of the day, you know, the issues that you alluded to it's not a destination. There's no destination here. This is an organic journey that constantly evolves. There's things that 10 years ago we never thought would have been an ethical issue, that now all of a sudden, wow, you know, what's going on here? We never thought about this. And, you know, the evolution of other parts of the game, for instance, you know, esports is now a big thing. You know, if you would have told me 20 years ago that 20,000 people would be going in an arena to watch two guys play a video game, I'd be going, what are you talking about? You know, so, and a lot of our clubs and a lot of our leagues and even FIFA and CONCACAF, you know, that's an opportunity for us to grow your brand, to grow your business. But is there any governance around that? It's a completely different element of the sport. So that's what I'm saying. This thing is an organic thing that we need to consistently look at. I mean, if you look at the transfer system, it was put in place in the early 2000s. That's 20 years ago, and and nobody looked at them until 18 months ago when we struck the stakeholders committee. I mean, I'm not sure something that complex as it relates to fiscal regulation, because that's what transfer system really is. We should not look at for 18 to 19 years. I'm not sure that's a very prudent way of governing the sport. And so those are things, for instance, we need to learn from. And the stakeholder committee is probably going to be in place forever, and as it should be. And I think its role will be to continue with, obviously, the confederations, and even the confederations have stakeholder committees. I know UEFA has one. In fact, I mean, I was, they asked me to go speak to it one time, and so it's even happening at the confederation level. And I think that's very, very important, because they're going to have issues that are a lot related to the international issues, but obviously are specific to their own thing. So I think it's very important that this vehicle is used, and that that perhaps it's also accelerated in terms of its progress.
Yeah. I want to get to some questions, but just before I do, Victor, how much of this is an opportunity to change things? How much of a concern do you have that whilst people are focusing on dealing with the coronavirus crisis, other people may take advantage, and it's an opportunity for more wrongdoing to creep back in?
Yeah, that's always a concern. I'm not going to say that. I think what's important is, though, as for leaders, for us, is that we take this opportunity, and I think, as I said at the beginning of this discussion, that it's the human aspect, and it's little things, Amanda. It's little things. It's, for instance, it's how we deal with each other as peers. It's how we speak to each other. It's even little things. For instance, there'll be upcoming elections, whether it's in confederations or otherwise. It's not talking down about your opponent. It's about talking about what you can bring to the table. Those are issues of empathy that have to come to the fore. There's too much of that sort of, I think, within the game where, and quite frankly, if you lack empathy, which to me is tied to integrity and the ability to make the right decision, if all you're about is criticizing others rather than looking in the mirror, quite frankly, I think you should be resigning from football. You shouldn't be in the game. The game doesn't need you, and the game needs people that, illustrate what the issues are, but are willing to work in an environment together, whether it's cross-confederation or with federations or within a confederation, to move forward, because that sort of attitude that has prevailed at times in the game needs to exit the game. And I think perhaps this impasse that we've had of not being able to meet and go watch football and whatever is an opportunity for us to have a bit of reflection on how we conduct ourselves within the game of football.
Okay, right. I absolutely have to get to some questions, because I've been very poor in that regard up to this point. So Simon Stone from BBC Sport says, before lockdown, Victor was involved in talks with FIFA to stop leagues playing matches abroad. Victor, is this more or less important now, as the bigger leagues and clubs will be driving revenues for everyone?
Yeah, it wasn't to stop. It was the FIFA statutes are very clear in terms of how it's a process that has to work. Obviously, people, it's called sanctioning. So if people want to play abroad, again, it's exactly what it is said about courtesy. If people want to play abroad, and we have friendlies in CONCACAF all the time, and there's a sanctioning process. It's part of associated football. It's not just about taking your club, getting on the plane, and going to play somewhere else. You have to have the respect. You expect your club to be respected. You expect your league to be respected. Then respect your federation. respect your confederation. And as a confederation, I need to respect my other confederations. And so that needs to be done in a process. And ultimately, people have the right to say yes or no. But in the same token, I think you're probably going to get people not say no when the process and the respect is there of what the process is. And I think that's what the discussions were. It wasn't so much of us saying no. It was us to respect what the process was and respect the fact that if, for instance, the English Premier League is in the middle of its season, I would think it would be kind of weird for the MLS to have its MLS Cup at Emirates Stadium the same week as the EPL playing its regular season. To me, that's a lack of respect. To say that an MLS team couldn't go play there, absolutely, but it has to be done with the acceptance of the local football authorities. In that case, it would be the English FA and obviously the EPL. And that was all. And I think there was a little bit of the Wild West going on too much, and that sort of respect process was not being complied with. And I think we needed to get back to that.
You've talked a number of times, haven't you, about this shifting of the European calendar to the calendar year. How realistic do you think that really is?
Yeah, actually, I didn't even talk. I only talked about it once, and it was in relation to an answer I gave to an Italian journalist, because I think in Italy they were thinking about it, and he asked me my opinion about it, and I said, listen, no idea is a bad idea, especially during these times here that we're trying to rethink the game. And I think if that's what Italian football is thinking about, that's fine. They should think about it. I mean, it's not like it's a new idea. It's done in many, many parts of the world, North America, South America. I believe even in Europe, there's a couple of leagues that play within the calendar year, if I'm not mistaken, maybe in Scandinavia, but I could be wrong there. Emmanuel might know better than me. Asia. So it's not a new idea. It's something that, it's the jurisdiction of the league and the federation to decide that. It's not my decision or FIFA's decision, and also UEFA, obviously, being their confederation. That's their decision and what they want to do. But I think if in terms of a study, by all means, I think everything should be studied at this point. But ultimately, it's their decision of how they want to run their own domestic league.
Tom Marshall from ESPN says it's become increasingly obvious that international soccer is going to be very different over the next 12 months or so. Do you have any ideas as yet how World Cup qualifying could look in CONCACAF?
Postponed.
Yeah, I think I've been. What was that, Emmanuel? Yeah,
you have postponed the qualifiers as one of the.
We haven't postponed the qualifiers. Yeah, we postponed the Gold Cup qualifiers. We postponed our Nations League Final Four. I think FIFA and the confederations, we will likely make a decision, I think, within a month or so of what the September window will look like that's coming up. I think also we are looking, as we postponed everything, I think for us at CONCACAF, our World Cup qualifying format has already been compromised with just the postponement of March and June in terms of how it's rolled out and how teams are selected with the FIFA ranking. So I think there's an integrity issue there to start with. And then there's also, I think, an organizational issue with the calendar itself. So we once we have some finalization on what September will look like in the next month, that will probably put an action plan in place to see what our ecosystem will look like, because it's not just about World Cup qualifying. We have to fit in a few other things as well, because we do have our Gold Cup next July. So we have to fit in a few other things, basically between now and Qatar. So it's about how do you manage that whole system and ensuring that things that have to get done need to get done. And if that means you have to reformat it, then you have to reformat it. Keeping in mind that integrity, the sporting integrity of the competition has to be paramount when you reformat it. And from a balance of probabilities, I would think that as with other things, our World Cup qualifying will likely have to be reformatted in some capacity.
And can you begin to
what that is? No, what that is, absolutely no clue, because until I know what the calendar looks like, once the confederations and FIFA make the decision on this calendar, and then we start looking at all the moving pieces in our confederation, then we'll be able to know what this thing looks like. If it's going to be group or a hex or like we have, or a play-in, or God knows what. So, but we have an entire competition department to look at those things from a modeling standpoint, and then it'll go through the right governance cycles with respect to council and our presidents to sort of make that final decision once we get to it.
Lars Christer Olsen said in the last webinar that he thought international football was going to be impacted for 2 to 3 years. Are you thinking along similar lines?
I believe that we need to foresee. I think that we need to prepare ourselves for a long-term hit because the international calendar is definitely a critical area. And if the situation was already difficult, now it's even worse. The congestion will be tremendous. And again, I would like to use the word dialogue, which was something that Victor mentioned. The dialogue between all key stakeholders is fundamental. And it has proven to be successful in finding solutions that meet everybody's common interests, but also for the reforms that we need to activate once we are back in our offices or able to trigger the reforms. At the moment, everything is stopped. And this dialogue, which in football has always existed over the past 15, 20 years, even though I remember the days where I was, as CEO of a league, I was not allowed to speak directly with FIFA. But things evolved, and now I believe that there are still tensions, but the dialogue will prevail, and solutions will be found. But yes, it will be 2-3 years. I wouldn't be surprised. Victor,
can you put an estimate on it?
Yeah, I think we need to also define what impact means. I mean, obviously, I think international football will be back. We'll be back in September. I'm not too optimistic on that in my confederation because of the realities of the borders and the closures of them. I think it'll be back in some capacity, but in terms of playing in front of 100,000 people for a final, I'm hoping that the reality will. I think we're all optimistic that when we hit the summer tournaments of next summer, starting with the Euro and then Copa America and then obviously the Gold Cup, that would be the beginning of what we knew before in terms of international football. So that's sort of, I think, where I see the light at the end of the tunnel is next summer in terms of getting back to some normalcy. Obviously, there needs to be things that have to be put in place between now and then, even from a medical perspective. But that's so our hope is for that, is that those summer tournaments would be the kickoff of getting back to that international football that we all enjoyed and experienced.
And I am aware we need to wrap up, but you mentioned the Euros, and we've had a question here from Philip Draper from the Football Association of Wales, asking, what are your views on Euro 2021? Will it be more practical for UEFA to rethink and perhaps play in just 1 or 2 countries rather than the cross-continent tournament that is planned as things stand?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, our Gold Cup is a cross-continent tournament, so I don't know any different. But obviously, in Europe, in a lot of ways, is I know it's many countries, but it's there is a bit of homogeny there in terms of how they do things. So, but ultimately, that is going to be UEFA's decision on how they want to do it. I mean, I don't know if they've made any announcements to that other than they've moved it from this year to next year. But I'm sure they're looking at like all of us, they're looking at all their events to see what's best for that event in terms of how it's going to run and where it's going to run. So, but ultimately, that's up to UEFA to decide.
Okay. Do you have a final thought, Victor, just before we wrap up? Any closing words for everybody?
Oh, I think the closing words are: listen, we all, I mean, everybody needs to focus on themselves and their families and their own health. I think that's a priority. And but I think we all know how much we miss football, and that's why we're all probably watching old games. And the great thing about that is, if your team hasn't won anything for many years, you can watch games that they actually won. So you're actually feeling pretty good about, the 1994 European Cup final or whatever you were watching. So it puts you in a pretty good mood. But I think that shows how much we miss the game, how much it's part of our DNA, and it'll be back. And I think it'll be back, like football has shown. When people thought football was going to be over when we went through the governance crisis we went through 5 years ago with the scandals, and they thought it was the end of football. And what football showed was that it survived that, and it survived that because of, again, the players and the fans and the love of the game. What our job is as caretakers of the game is to ensure that A, those things never happen again, and B, that we make the game better than it is. So we need to take this opportunity during this pandemic to ensure that things are done right, that things don't go off the rails, but also, quite frankly, we need to improve where we need to improve so that our fans and our players can continue bringing joy to our lives.
Absolutely. And let me just finally throw it over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Victor. Those sentiments are definitely what I have also in my mind. A message of optimism, of confidence, and I would like to say in a very pragmatic way that crisis is a mix of danger and opportunity. And I think regarding the danger, all measures are putting in place. Sports authorities are corresponding to what was the expectations of the fans, of the global industry, but opportunity. I hope this is not an opportunity to go back to business as usual. I hope that this is not an opportunity to reinstate old habits and old mentalities. I hope this is an opportunity to refresh, to enhance, to improve the way the sport is governed and operates. And this is why we are committed to have an open, constructive, positive dialogue with everyone, bringing together, obviously, the sports organizations right at the forefront. And Victor, we welcome your support in this cause and in the pursuit of this movement, as with Seferin, as with Johnny and others. It is important that sport gives an example of leadership and seizes all these constraints to innovate and to reform itself again and again. Secondly, we would like also to extend our offer through our universal standards to all sports organizations. They don't need to start from scratch. And also to invite the global community to support the independent rating system, because in matters of integrity or transparency, proclamations have little value. Actions speak louder than words. And this is why we are working relentlessly with a growing community, which includes, obviously, the media, who has been a leading light in calling for greater reforms. And on that note, I would like to thank Amanda and CNN, of course. Victor, thanks for joining us and accepting my invitation. And we look forward to continue the dialogue and cooperation with you all. And if I may, also a message to our members, to our community of organizations who have been relentless in their support to our mission. That support is now more fundamental than ever. So thank you all. And thank you all, the ones that have joined us, who have also contributed to the success and the interest of this debate.
Yeah, absolutely. A big thank you too to Emmanuel and Victor for a very thought-provoking discussion, which I hope everybody watching has found interesting. As we said, 400 registrations from across the globe joining us today. So thank you so much for your time. And the SIGA webinar partnership with Soccerex is here to stay. The next date is already in the diary. It's due to take place on June the 3rd. watch this space for updates in terms of speakers, who's going to be taking part, and of course what we're going to be discussing, I should say. But from me and everybody for now, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, stay well, and thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.